At this time, you are going to the course related to Databricks Certified Associate Developer of Spark. As part of this short sectional module, we'll be talking about dropping the columns from data frame. There's a function called as drop on top of data frames. We should be able to use it to drop the columns from the data frame and create new ones. It is a short section. However, it is a very important one. You might end up getting 1 or 2 questions as part of the certification exam. If at all you get 1 or 2 questions, it will be very easy to actually answer those questions. So just make sure that you practice enough and have better control on drop so that you can answer those questions if at all you get those questions as part of the exam. That being said, in the sectional module, first we will actually go through the details related to creating the data frame as we have seen earlier. That notebook will be used as part of the subsequent sections or modules. Once we are ready with the notebook, we'll be using that to create the data frame to explore all common use cases with respect to drop function, which is available on top of data frames to drop the columns from the data frame. Let's go through the details so that you understand what I'm talking about here. As part of this sectional module, we are going to the details related to dropping columns from Spark data frames. Let's come up with a notebook as we have seen earlier so that this notebook can be run from the other notebooks to create the data frame quickly. Once the data frame is created, we should be able to explore drop using some of the common use cases so that we have complete understanding with respect to drop that is available on top of data frame. In this case, we just need to make sure that all the cells doesn't have any bugs. To confirm that, you should be able to click on this and you should be able to run all cells in one shot. Once you run, make sure you review the details. If there are any errors, make sure you fix those errors, then you actually take it further. In this case, you can see that there are no errors. We are able to preview the data as well by using dataframe name.show. You can see that the data frame contains 5 records. We'll be using this data frame to explore drop function in subsequent lectures of this section or module. As part of this lecture, let's get an overview of Spark data frame drop function. Drop is a function which is available on top of Spark data frame. First, let's create a Spark data frame. Then we'll actually see the help related to the drop function by saying dataframe name.drop. Let's actually create the data frame by running this. Now data frame is created by name users_df. You can see here. You should be able to preview data with respect to all columns using show. Many times we might want to create a new data frame using all the fields. In that scenario, we should be able to use star like this. It will actually create a new data frame. I'm using show on top of it and you can see the results here. However, sometimes we might want to select all the fields except 1 or 2 fields. For example, in this case, let's say I would like to select all the fields except last updated TS. Instead of specifying all the columns as part of select by using comma as separator, we should be able to use drop and we should be able to drop the columns which are not relevant for us. Let's go to the help related to drop and then we'll actually see few use cases where drop is used in real world scenarios. You should be able to say help and then dataframe name.drop to get the help on drop. You can see that drop actually takes varying arguments. The type of calls is supposed to be string or column. So you can actually pass as many columns as you want. You should be able to specify the column names as strings, or you can actually build column type objects and you should be able to pass column type objects as well. Let's go through the examples so that you understand where drop is actually used in real world scenarios. As part of this lecture, let's go to the details related to dropping a single column from Spark data frame. First, let's run this cell. It will take care of creating a data frame by name users_df. You should be able to preview the schema by saying print schema like this. You can see all the columns here. Now you should be able to specify the column name as string. In this case, I'm passing last updated TS, which is nothing but one of the columns in the data frame. I'm passing the name of the column as string. It will work without any issues. You can see that the new schema doesn't have last updated TS. You can also pass a single column using data frame notation. In this case, we're actually passing data frame notation. It will actually return column type object. Drop also takes a column type object. You can actually run this. You should be able to see the details here. Now, last updated _TS is not available as part of the schema. This will actually result in a new data frame. It will not touch the existing data frame. The existing data frame will still contain last updated TS. As we are trying to use print schema on top of this logic, it is actually printing the schema of the new data frame which is created internally. Now we should be able to import call. We can also pass the column names as column objects like this. It will actually take care of dropping the column for us. You should be able to run this. You can see that last updated TS is missing. In case if you pass the column name as string or column type object where the name doesn't exist, it will just ignore. It will not throw any error saying the column does not exist. You can see here there is no column by name user ID as part of users_df. I have passed it as column object to drop. However, it have just ignored. it did not throw any error. Just keep this in mind. If at all as part of the certification exam they wanted to trick you, this is one place where they will be able to trick using drop function, and hence make sure you remember this. If you use a drop function with a column where the name doesn't exist, then it will not affect anything. It will not throw any error. It will still create a new data frame with all the columns in the original data frame. That being said, as we have understood how to drop a single column from Spark data frame, now let's go to the details about dropping multiple columns from a Spark data frame. As part of this lecture, let's go to the details related to dropping multiple columns from a Spark data frame. First, let's create a data frame by name users_df by running this cell. You can see that the data frame is created. You should be able to drop multiple columns in one shot by passing both the columns as strings like this. You can actually run this. You should be able to see the schema without first name and last name. Both first name and last name are missing. You can also review the data by using show on top of the new data frame which is created because of the drop function. You can see that there is no first name as well as last name as part of the output. Now, if you wanted to use drop to drop multiple columns from the data frame, then you have to pass the column names as strings only. If you try to pass the column names as column type objects, it will fail. Let's go to the details so that you understand what I'm talking about here. To make sure that we pass columns as column objects, let's make sure we import call. Now call is imported. Now I'm trying to drop first name as well as ID from the users_df. I'm actually passing both the columns as column type objects. You can see here. Now if I run this, it will fail. It is saying each call in the param list should be a string. If you are passing only one column, that one column can be of type column object or it can be of type string. However, if you try to drop multiple columns at once, all the column names should be of type string only. Then only it will work. Also keep in mind that if you have column name which does not exist, the column will be ignored. In this case, I'm actually passing 3 columns as strings: user ID, first name, last name. There is no user ID as part of users_df. Now when I run this, it actually dropped first name and last name from the new data frame. However, as there is no user_ID, it did not impact anything. It just ignored that user ID column. But first name and last name are successfully dropped in the new data frame that is created because of this logic. You can also preview the data by using show. You should be able to see all the fields except for first name and last name. User ID doesn't exist. It will not do anything with respect to user ID in this case. As part of the output, we are able to see the data with respect to all the columns except for first name and last name. This is how you should be able to drop multiple columns from a Spark data frame. Keep in mind that when you try to drop multiple columns from a data frame, you have to pass all the column names as strings only. If you try to pass more than one column name as column object, it will fail. As part of this lecture, let's go to the details related to dropping list of columns from a Spark data frame. First, let's create a data frame by name users_df by running this cell. You can see that the data frame is created successfully. When it comes to this data frame, we have columns such as first name, last name, email, phone numbers. In some of the enterprises, they are treated as PII or confidential information. PII stands for personally identifiable information. Many times, we would like to drop these columns for further processing. If there is a requirement to drop one or more of these columns from any data frame, then we should be able to create the list of PII columns like this, and then we should be able to use drop by passing the list to drop function by converting the list to varying arguments. Let's go to the details so that you understand what I'm talking about here. First, I'm creating a list by name PII_columns. This list contains 4 elements. Each element is of type string. The values are nothing but first name, last name, email, phone numbers. You can see that these are nothing but field names that are there as part of our original data frame. Now, if you try to pass PII_columns to drop directly, it will fail. As part of drop, if you wanted to pass only one column, the column can be of type string or it can be column type object. However, if you wanted to pass multiple columns, we have to pass multiple strings only or varying strings only. We will not be able to pass a list like this. We need to make sure that this list is converted to varying arguments. We will see that in a moment. But if you try to pass the list directly like this, it will fail. To fix this, we need to convert list to varying arguments. Now, you should be able to convert a list to varying arguments while invoking functions such as drop by having star at the beginning. Now you should be able to run it, and you can see that a new data frame is created. The data frame name is nothing but users_df_no PII. You can actually review the columns here. You can see that there is no first name, last name, phone numbers, or even email. That being said, you should be able to print the schema by running this piece of code. You can also preview the data. Now we are able to see the data related to all the columns except for those columns which are part of a list called as PII_columns. Now, if you have a column which doesn't exist, it will be just ignored. Let me run this. First, we need to make sure that a new data frame is created. Let me copy this. Let me add here. Now, if I run it, you can see that SSN does not exist is ignored. Along with that, it have actually dropped all the other columns that are there as part of the PI underscore columns. You should be able to print the schema using print schema and also preview the results using show. So in case when we actually pass varying arguments, if the column doesn't exist, it will be ignored. Even if you pass only one column, if the column doesn't exist as part of the original data frame, it will be ignored, which means the new data frame will contain all the columns that are there as part of the original data frame. This is how you should be able to drop list of columns from a Spark data frame. It is commonly used in many projects, especially while dealing with PI columns. As part of this lecture, let's understand how to drop duplicate records from Spark data frames. Here are the features that are available with respect to dropping duplicate records in Spark. They are nothing but dropping duplicates based on all columns. It is also same as distinct. Also, we can actually drop duplicates based on certain columns. Typically, at times, we might want to drop the duplicates based upon a key column and some other important non-key columns. We might not have to consider all the column values to actually consider duplicates. When it comes to the functions, we have distinct drop duplicates as well as drop duplicates. This is snake case. This is camel case. Both are nothing but synonyms to each other. Using these functions, we should be able to drop the duplicates. Distinct will not provide you too much of flexibility. You can only use distinct and you should be able to drop the duplicates based upon all column values. Whereas with respect to drop underscore duplicates or drop duplicates, these actually give us a little bit of flexibility where we should be able to specify the columns based on which we need to consider the duplicates. That being said, first we have created a data frame here. The data frame name is nothing but users underscore df. You can review the data here. There are 8 records. In these 8 records, there are 2 records which are related to user ID 3. These 2 records are nothing but exact duplicates to each other. Same is the case with user ID 4. We have exact duplicates with respect to user ID 4. With respect to user ID 2, we have 2 records, but they are not exact duplicates. You can see here. When it comes to amount paid, it is different between the two, which means they are not exact duplicates. We will see how to eliminate duplicates if at all we have to consider even these two as duplicates when we actually go through the APIs that are relevant for this lecture. They are nothing but distinct drop underscore duplicates and drop duplicates. First, let's get the count. You can see that the number of records in users underscore df is nothing but 8. Now you should be able to review the help related to distinct. You can see the documentation here. It doesn't take any arguments. You just have to say distinct. It will make sure that it drops all the duplicates based upon all the columns, and then it will only return unique records. You can actually see here. It have dropped one of the 3 and one of the 4, which means it have dropped the records with respect to user IDs 3 and 4. It have dropped only one of them. You can also get the count here because it have dropped one record for user ID 3 and one record for user ID 4. We can see that count is 6. Now you can also use drop underscore duplicates or drop duplicates. You can see the documentation here. Drop underscore duplicates is actually redirecting to drop duplicates only because both of them are nothing but synonyms to each other. You can see here drop underscore duplicates is an alias for drop duplicates. So you can review the documentation for drop duplicates and you can take it further. When it comes to drop duplicates, it takes one optional keyword argument. It is nothing but subset. By default, it is set to none. However, you should be able to pass list of columns to it. You can actually see the details here. You can also use drop duplicates without any arguments like this. It will be same as distinct. However, you should be able to specify the list of columns like this to drop the duplicates based upon the values in these 2 fields. So if values related to these 2 fields repeats across multiple records, then only one record will be returned for all those multiple records. You can see the output here. In this case, even though there are 3 records here, Alice with age 8 and height 80, and the one is with the same values, then we also have a third record where age is 10 and height is 80. In this case, when we actually say drop duplicates name comma height, because height is same across all the 3 records, only one record have returned. Whereas here it have returned 2 records because this is not exact duplicate when it compared to other 2 records. You can also use drop duplicates for our purpose. However, even if you wanted to pass only one column to drop duplicates, you will not be able to pass directly like this. You have to always pass as list only. That's why this is actually failing, saying that there is no function which actually takes a string as argument with respect to drop duplicates. However, you should be able to pass that single column as list like this, and you can see that even one of the records with respect to user ID 2 is removed, which means the duplicates are considered only on this field, which is nothing but ID. If you want to consider both ID and amount paid as the fields to actually determine the duplication of the records, then you should be able to specify the column names like this in the form of list. Now you can see that with respect to records related to user ID 2, both of them are here, because when it comes to amount paid, it is not duplicate between the two records. This is how you should be able to use drop duplicates to drop duplicates based upon subset of fields rather than considering everything. The keyword argument with respect to this one is nothing but subset. You can see here. It is very, very important for you to remember this. It is nothing but subset. It takes only one argument. If at all you want to pass using keyword argument, you have to use subset, then equal to, then you have to specify the columns in the form of list. This is how you should be able to drop duplicate records from Spark data frames using functions such as distinct drop underscore duplicates or drop duplicates. As part of the previous lecture, we have gone through the details related to dropping duplicates. Now let's talk about dropping null-based records from Spark data frames. Here are the features that are available with respect to dropping records based on null values. You should be able to drop records when all column values are nulls. For example, if you look at the output here, with respect to this record, all the column values are nulls. You should be able to drop these type of records. Also, if you look at the second statement, it says drop records when any of the column value is null. Even if one column is null, if you want to drop those records, you should be able to drop using certain function. We'll actually walk through those details very soon. In this case, this can be dropped, this can be dropped, this can be dropped, this can be dropped, and this can be dropped. Then the next one is nothing but dropping records that have less than threshold non-null values. If the threshold is 3, if there are less than 3 non-null values, then only it will drop those records. Otherwise, it will not drop. So in this case, if you consider this record, it have 4 columns with null values and 4 columns with not null values. If threshold is 5, then this record will be deleted. If threshold is 1, 2, 3 or 4, as we have 4 non-null columns, this will not be deleted. So when it comes to the functions that handles with null values, especially to drop the records based on null values, they support a keyword argument called as thresh. Based on that, it will actually consider whether the records should be dropped or not. Also, we should be able to specify subset of columns and then configure whether to drop the records when all those columns are nulls or any of the columns are nulls. Once we go through the APIs, you will understand what I'm talking about. With respect to the example, in this case, if you actually specify subset of columns as ID and amount paid to consider whether the records are supposed to be dropped based on null values in those fields, if you specify all, then even though there are 2 records with respect to ID and amount paid which we can consider, only this one will be deleted because this one have only amount paid as null but not ID. But if you use any, then even this one will be deleted. So when it comes to the APIs will give us the flexibility with respect to how to deal with dropping the rows with null values. When it comes to the functions we typically use to deal with those records which contain null values. They are nothing but df.na.drop and df.dropna. When it comes to NA within a data frame, it is nothing but attribute which exposes functions to deal with nulls. On top of drop, there are other functions also to deal with nulls. When it comes to df.dropna, it is nothing but synonym for this. Now let's go to the usage of these functions to deal with all these scenarios. You can see that we have created a data frame by name users_df. You can also preview the data here. It has several records where the column values are nulls. When it comes to this record, it contains all columns as nulls. Even this one contains all column values as nulls. When it comes to this one, except ID, rest of the columns have null values. When it comes to this one, except email, rest of the columns have null values. When it comes to this one, 4 of the columns have null values while other 4 have non-null values. So there are quite a few records covering quite a few scenarios with respect to dealing with null-based records, especially to drop them. You can actually see the overall count. We have 13 of them. As mentioned earlier, when it comes to NA as part of data frame, it is nothing but object of type data frame NA functions. It actually exposes several other functions. And the functions that are exposed are nothing but drop, fill, and replace. For this lecture, only drop is relevant. Fill and replace can be used to deal with null values in a different way. Also, we have a function called as drop NA directly on top of data frame. It is nothing but alias to users_df.na.drop. Now you should spend some time in understanding the help related to drop NA. When it comes to drop NA, it takes 3 keyword arguments. They are nothing but how, thresh, and subset. When it comes to how, the default is nothing but any, which means if any of the column values is null in a given record, then that record will be dropped. So in this case, if you just pass drop NA without any argument, then this one, 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 and also this one. All these will be dropped. If you actually say all, then only 2 records will be dropped. They are nothing but this one and this one. You should be able to pass one argument to drop NA by saying all. It will take care of dropping only those 2 records. Now you can also say any or all as first argument, and then you should be able to specify list of columns using subset. For example, in this case, if you say drop NA and if you say all, and then if you say subset equal to ID and amount paid, then only this record will be dropped. It is because both ID as well as amount paid are nulls. However, if you say any, not only this one, but also this one will be dropped. That is how you should be able to use the combination of how and subset. I have also explained about thresh. You have to read the documentation here. If specified, drop rows that have less than thresh non-null values. I have gone through the details about it already. However, this will override the how parameter. So if you have both how and thresh, whether you have any or all, it doesn't matter. It will only be based on thresh. However, along with the thresh, you should be able to specify subset as well. That being said, you can also go to the details related to the drop function that is available on top of NA attribute as part of data frame. You can see that it also provides you the same details what you are seeing here, and also you can actually read this statement. It says dataframe.drop NA and dataframe NA functions.drop are aliases of each other. When it comes to NA within users_df, it is of type dataframe NA functions. Now you should be able to scroll down. You can actually review the data. We have all the 13 records here. If you say all, you can see that it have deleted only 2 records, and you should be able to count. You will see only 11 records. If you say any, you can see that it is only returning 5 records because 8 of the records have at least one column null value. Now let's look at the example related to thresh equal to 2. If the rows contain less than 2 non-null values, then those will be dropped. Otherwise, the rows will be retained. In this case, this row contain 0 non-null values. This row contain 0 non-null values. This row contain only 1 non-null value, which is nothing but this one. Even this row contain only 1 non-null value, which is nothing but email ID, which means those 4 records will be dropped. You can see the details here. The original count is 13. If you actually count these, you will see 9 records. So all those 4 records where there are less than 2 non-null column values, they are actually dropped. You should be able to preview the data once again. Now let's look at the example with respect to subset. In this case, we have specified ID and email as part of subset, which means if both the columns are null values, then only the records will be dropped. In this case, we have 2 records which contain all columns as null values. Those are dropped. And also there are quite a few records where ID as well as email are null. Even those are dropped. You can actually review the data here and you should be able to compare. This one is dropped. This one is dropped. This one is not dropped because ID is not null. This one is not dropped because email is not null. This one is dropped because both ID as well as email are not null. If you say any, there will be quite a few additional records that will be dropped because this one contain email as null. This one contain ID as null. Because of that, even these 2 records will be dropped. You can actually see the output with respect to any here. You have fewer records at this time. This is how you should be able to use dataframe.na.drop or dataframe.drop NA to actually drop null-based records from Spark data frames.